as well as kind of using Mapbox Studio to discuss how to kind of create your own map styles. I also wanted to just give a brief background of who I am. My name is Vanessa. I'm a cartographer, formerly trained. I also am a spatial analyst and designer, and I just love thinking about every possible way you can use spatial data and design to really tell stories. I'm a senior map designer at Mapbox. I'm also the founder of Creative Carto, which is like this online, offline, currently only online meetup where people just kind of create and share and ask questions. And it's really just like a monthly meetup where you get to do your own personal projects and kind of just share them, and it's an accountability sort of thing. I'm also an editor for the Atlas of Design, which is just a book about maps. And very much, this is basically all to say that I'm a huge nerd when it comes to maps. And if you're on Twitter, feel free to follow me. I'm pretty active. And if you have any follow-up questions, I will happily answer there. In terms of what I'll be going over the next hour and a half-ish before Johnny takes over, I will be doing a live demo introduction of Mapbox Studio. Feel free to follow along. Please do. And I'll show you if you haven't signed up yet, then you can sign up as you go along. And then at the end, we will be creating some styles, and I hope that you will create them with me. The second thing that I'll be discussing is really just a basic definition of what conceptual cartography is, and as well as a deeper dive into what that looks like. And then we'll go into a Halloween aesthetic breakdown using some of what we learned in the section so that you can make some Halloween themed maps, because it's October. So that I figured was a fun way to kind of learn how to use Mapbox Studio and also have a map to come out of it if you go along live. So if you haven't signed up yet or haven't explored Mapbox at all you have to do is go to studio.mapbox.com, and that is where you can sign up for your own account. It's free, and feel free to do that right now. And I'm gonna start live demoing from there. And also you can just do all of this later, but I just wanted to make sure you knew what link to go to. And also, I suppose I should give a brief overview of what Mapbox is in case no one knows what that is. So Mapbox is a lot of things. You can do so many spatial related projects using various Mapbox pieces of the company. I'll be talking about the way that you can make maps, which is Mapbox Studio, but it also has a lot of developer-friendly location data. Also is used in nav services in some cars. It's used in newspapers like the Washington Post, as well as apps on your phone. So very many things, but I will only just be talking about how you can make maps. And Studio is essentially the Adobe Illustrator of mapping. It's powerful when it comes to custom map design, and you just have so many options. So you can create a style yourself and start from scratch, but I highly recommend using one of the templates that we offer. There's 6 of them. Basic is the most used. It's applicable in most general use cases. And it also has some color variations that just to show how you can also, they're kind of examples of how you can play around with the color and options that exist within Studio. But you also can just use these out of the box if you just want to use a map quickly for whatever map-based service you're thinking about. And Monochrome is a template that also has some variations out of box that you also can customize. And Monochrome, as the name suggests, is completely based off of just one color. So this is all based off of a bluish tone. The bubblegum variation is based off of pink. And again, you can go ahead and customize it yourself, which I will go into later when we are together working on a map style that will look kind of like a Halloween map. It's really cool that you can really customize it so quickly, just using one color. This is a really great use case scenario if you just want to quickly pop some data on top of a map, because it's all one color underneath and it kind of works with whatever you're putting on top of it, and it makes whatever you put on top come to the fore. The streets template has streets, as the name suggests, added in addition to shields. So this is a good use case for a navigation sort of map if you want to show roads to whoever the viewer is reading. And we also have an outdoors template. It's really great for any outdoors use case. It also has terrain added on and contour lines. And satellite streets is essentially the same as the streets template, but it has satellite imagery in the background. If you really want people to see the real world on your map, it's a good choice. And then we also have a navigation template if anyone is building some apps out there and wants to have navigation abilities in your car and turn-by-turn abilities. This is a great template to use. So in terms of going over your ability to customize, I'm gonna go ahead and use basic as an example. So if you're following along, you can just click customize basic. And with every template, it'll just open up the template that you chose. And Studio has this thing called components. Style components were released last year for Studio at the end of December. So it's almost a year that these components have existed. And what components are an abstraction of a group of related data layers that provide sensible cartographic defaults and opportunities for customization by optimizing the most common property changes for styles and packaging them into simple user interface controls. That is a lot. What that really means is any of these components has grouped together the data layers that exist in this other tab, which is the way Studio used to be built for those who haven't used it before. And it groups them in such a way that they kind of are all related and connected for that particular component. So for this road network component, everything is grouped together there. And if I make a change here in the component, then it will affect that entire component. So every single data layer within that particular component. So I don't have to go and edit every single layer within this layers panel. So that really makes things faster if you don't really care about editing every single layer. If you're not looking to customize everything, you can just quickly change something based on your needs. So here I quickly changed the road width to be a lot thicker or a lot thinner here. And what's really nice is beyond just some like visual changes, you can make some of these more complicated or have like less data depending on what you want. So again, using the road network as an example, standard has a little more data than the simple option does. And then navigation has road shields pop up when you zoom out, and will also have the navigation association. There we go. Sorry, my internet is a little slow since I'm live streaming, but there you see some road shields in Paris. And so administrative boundaries as a component is really everything relating to administrative boundaries. So states, country boundaries. What's also really nice is you can change the world view to different, like if you live in a particular area of the world, you can change whatever your world view is of particular boundaries. So you can go outside of the United States worldview perspective. You can like see particular boundaries from the perspective of Japan or India or China. And the buildings component lets you, let me just zoom in here so you can actually see what's changing. So in this basic template, the house numbers aren't turned on, but if you are creating a map where it would be useful to have house numbers, I'm gonna also navigate to, I'm gonna use this search bar to go to somewhere that I'm more familiar with. I'm not familiar with Paris, sorry if anyone happens to live there. I live in Washington, DC and have for the past 5 years. So I'm just gonna go ahead and zoom in. And here you can see these house numbers popped up. They're a little subtle and you can change that elsewhere. But that's really helpful if you're like looking for addresses and whatever your use case is. If you need an address added on, what's really cool is you can make 3D buildings pop up really quickly. This used to take a little bit longer, but we have styled it in such a way where all you have to do is turn this toggle on and off. And you can use this pitch arrow to move your map around a little bit. And if you want to see, if you want it to see it from a different angle, you can add to the URL 60, and it'll pitch it so you can really see what the 3D buildings look like. So if you were using this to show buildings for a real estate agency, for example, or you just really love your neighborhood and you want to show off like some of the different buildings and heights, this is a really cool option to add and kind of just make things pop. I'll just make it go back, and I'm going to go ahead and turn these two off. Land and water is a component that, as the name suggests, allows you to change different pieces of land use. So I'm going to zoom out to country level so you can see this change. Right now, land cover is turned off, and land cover includes agricultural space, different things like tree cover, and if you turn it off, you'll see that some stuff disappeared, and some stuff stayed put. And you can add some shadows to your water. And natural features refers to just some point labels like mountains, and you can affect that. Place labels is a great component for customizing your maps, because obviously the world we live in, there are just so many places that are labeled, from countries to cities to points of interest, which is a separate category. And you can really control how heavily labeled or little labeled you want. So maybe you don't care at all about seeing that many places on your map and you only just want to have it referenced, like have it as a general reference. You can really pull back the number of labels. But if your map is all about where you're navigating or walking around or just that place, you can add a lot more components just within this area. And you can do the same with points of interest. So I really love playing around with the points of interest bit, because this really lets you customize it to your liking. So if you turn the toggle of control density by category, you get all these options of what you can increase in terms of density or decrease in terms of density. So if I'm going to go back to Washington, D.C. again. If I wanted to make a map for one of my friends and tell them what parts of DC to go visit when they're here, I really love all the parks in DC, and I also think the monuments are really cool to see. So I would make this map just by pulling back all these other spaces that I don't think are relevant to what I want to show them. I'm going to keep historic related items on there, because what tourist doesn't like seeing historic spaces? I'll turn down industrial, I'll increase landmark, gonna turn down lodging, medical. I love parks, so I'm gonna have that go up. Public facilities probably is useful in case anyone has to go to the bathroom. And I'll just turn everything else down. And as you can see, as I'm doing this, things disappeared from the map. And this is just such a great, fast way to quickly customize your map. If you really are just trying to show a particular piece, that's all you have to do. And you don't have to go into the layers, which you can customize things much more, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But this really does the trick unless you're really trying to highlight a very particular spot. So I could just send this map to my friend who's coming to visit DC and say, hey, this is like where you can check out this map. It's going to showcase a lot of the parks, and you really you'll only see what I find to be relevant, which is parks and sort of touristy type places. And I already went over the road network, but I'll go over it a little more just to talk about what you can do with road shields. So I think this is a pretty neat feature. You can change the road shields to be less saturated, so you can make it go monochrome, and it'll just go to a default color based off of your base map. And if you want it to be lighter, dependent on, or darker, dependent on whatever the other elements in your map are, you can go ahead and increase or decrease lightness. And that's just really nice, because if you want road shields to be on there so that people using your map know where things are, but it's kind of more of a reference thing rather than driving and really needing to utilize the road shields for anything. It is a nice way to kind of match that to your map and make it kind of a more aesthetic addition rather than a heavy sort of piece on the map, because the way shields are colored in real life, they do tend to be pretty contrasted, and that red and blue is a pretty strong color against many other colors. So that gives you the option of kind of making it your own if it's not a sort of focal piece of your map. And in full color, you also can increase lightness and increase or decrease saturation, which also is helpful, especially if you still need to maintain some of that color relationship on your map. So transit, and do explore many of the other options. I can't talk about every single thing, otherwise I'll just be chatting for hours and Johnny won't get to talk. But transit also has some really great stuff. Transit also has that increase of saturation and lightness or decrease, or changing to monochrome for symbology, because the transit systems do have symbols on the maps. But if you want them to only have text or only have an icon, if on the map that you're making, you only want your buses and metro spaces to have the little symbol that represent it and not be labeled. Again, if it's only for reference and not for anyone needing to find a very particular space, we have that option here in the components. You can add or remove transit labels as well. So these were turned off. I just turned them on, so I can go ahead and show you what it looks like with just the icon popping up, or just the text if you want a very text-based map. Many of us are really used to seeing the combination of symbol and label, but it's good to have that option, again, depending on how you're trying to design your map. Another important piece that all these components have is you can change the language of your map, in addition to just having it be local language specific. So local language means as you pan around the map, if I go to Spain, now this is all in Spanish, but if I pan over to Germany, the language of the map is in German, but I could change it so that the entire map is in English, or that the entire map is in French, or all these other languages. It's nice to have local language in case whoever is looking at your map and you know that they're going to be in different parts of the world, and you know that your audience is very specific to where they live and not just like a particular audience of folks that speak your language. It's a good option to use. And finally, the walking and cycling component. I'm going to go back to DC. The walking and cycling component lets you turn on or off particular pieces that are for if you're moving around not by car. So this means that it'll kind of bring things to the fore that are, for someone who's walking around. So I might think it's important as me walking around that there's like this sort of concrete feature around the National World War II Memorial, because that lets me know I can walk there, but it might not be as important in other maps. And they do kind of, you have to like design for including that in the map, depending on how many different colors you're using in your map. So it's also a nice piece to take away if you're not using, if your audience isn't particular to people moving around by foot. And there are other options here as well, so feel free to explore that too. And so in addition to that all being highly customizable and pretty quick for creating maps, I really like that in, I'm gonna go ahead and change the road network to simple so that the road shields aren't taking over. I like the color palette area as well, because you don't have to go in and change, again, every single data layer. The color palette also has the same relationship as these components do, where if you change a color for something that has a lot of features, such as roads, you don't have to go into the data layers to edit each data layer individually, although you could if you were really making something highly customized. Here I can just change the road color once, and it will change the color relationship of not only the roads, but you may have noticed that the road label halo also changed to make sure that it was legible. This is not the best color choice, but I wanted to kind of show how quickly everything changes. And then if I change this to the standard road network, roads, there are more color options that you can add on. So this manage color palette allows you to remove or add pieces to your color palette. And if you remove something, that just means that it's getting removed, and the color that it will then be automatically matching to will be your base map color. So that sort of land color. So if you do remove a color from the color palette, it's not going to revert to like a black. It's just going to revert to a color relationship that already exists in the back end for if you're not directly controlling it in the color palette. So I'm going to add motorways and trunks to this here. And as you can see, it immediately adjusted something. So motorway and trunks are where we have a lot of high traffic. So that's pretty useful if I'm thinking about using a more complicated road structure like standard or navigation. And often you see, like in Google Maps or Mapbox Maps, if you've seen Mapbox Maps before, you usually see motorway and trunks as a stronger color, because for drivers, people do usually want to see those roads first, like when they're on highways, and it really lets them know those are roads that have more lanes. And then the other roads which have less lanes or are more residential or just inner city roads are all a different color choice that I can change. If I wanted to make it match a little, I can go ahead and copy this hex value or copy the other values that exist here and go into roads and make it match. And if I still want to kind of emulate what other folks do in their map designs, I can make it just go a little lighter and pull this little toggle here, just as a quick example. And something else that exists within the component structure that you can quickly change, and also again that has a sort of relationship across the map, taking in different data layers and grouping them so that you only have to edit it here. You can edit all the country labels across the globe like with one quick click. So I can zoom out. Well, I'll use some place labels as an example here. So if I change minor cities, and I really want minor cities to kind of come to the fore of the map, I can increase the text size using this or decrease it. And if I think that it'd be really beneficial to have the text be all uppercase, like maybe I think these cities are super important, so I want people to really see them more, changing things to uppercase or bolding text, which you also can do. You can change the typeface in here. That will really help, be really more impactful visually than if I have it smaller. And if I have it smaller and want people to still see the place labels, and they're still slightly important, but I want it to fade, I can still keep these bold, but make it smaller, and then go ahead and make place labels just be a lighter color, like that. So that quick shift made them kind of be pushed back a little visually, but they still are, as you can see, kind of a little bit impactful because they're bold despite being a lighter color or smaller. So just with those like 2 quick clicks, you kind of change the level of impact that those labels had. And it's really, really nice to be able to do that within the component side here, because then you can do that in 2 to 3 clicks instead of, again, many clicks within the data layers. Again, though, if you're someone who really likes highly customizing, you can still go into the layers and do so, and I will dive into that a little bit. Before doing so, I did want to go over some things in this menu. So if you have any custom symbols that you want to upload, you can just go ahead and upload them here in this bar where it says images, and you upload images there. The custom images is great because you can upload your own custom symbology. So here are some examples, like airplanes, of course, are used for airports. Fish, these little fish symbols are part of the Mapbox specific Maki icons that we've created that you will see on the maps. And even on this map here, you're seeing like the park symbol. This is also where you can upload custom road symbology signs. So these like road signs all exist within this sort of image visual space, and you can scroll and see all of them that already exist on the map. And so if you have your own custom image, or maybe your own custom icon for your company or brand, or you just want something fun, say like you want to upload a pumpkin image for a Halloween map, you can go ahead and upload it here. You do want to make sure that these are SVG. SVG is a type of image extension, just like JPEG or PNG. That is just, it needs to be an SVG because an SVG is a type of file that can get bigger or smaller as a vector rather, so it's not pixelated. And that is what everything is made of on this map. They're all vectors, so that when you zoom in and out, there's not pixelation happening. That is similar to, I don't know if you've ever worked in Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator is entirely vector-based. So another parallel of how this is pretty similar to Adobe Illustrator. Cool. That is the super basic overview of Mapbox Studio, and now I'm just gonna start explaining a little more advanced things, but that everyone can still do. And I want to talk about data-driven styling. Data-driven styling really gives you full control on how, not only how you want to kind of style your map base the way that Studio allows you, but it lets you have full control over how you want to style your data. This means like everything on this map right now also is data. So I'm going to use the map that exists to show you how to style your own data, or just using the data that's already on the map to use data-driven styling. I'm gonna go ahead and just use a different map just for fun. So I'm going to the outdoors map just to have like a different base map example in the background. All right, so data-driven styling, you'll need to go into the layers tab. And again, going to navigate to Washington, DC, just because I know what everything is on the base map, so it's easier for me to explain. So I might like open this map and really love how detailed it is and not want to change everything in components, but maybe I am not happy with the way the points of interest are styled, and I don't even, like, maybe I just have a really specific amount of things I want to style, and I can just remove this from the map visually by making it invisible. Here, there's this little eye icon. So I'm gonna remove the point of interest labels and just make my own. To do that, you go to the Layers tab and you click this little Add New Layer button. And when you do that, adding layers opens up this sort of data interface space. And at the moment, it's showing all the possible data layers that currently are live and exist on your map. And these obviously this isn't what the map looks like right now. But this is just kind of showing you as a sort of reference point of what you have available, and that is the active sources. And if I go, so Mapbox Streets V8 is Mapbox's own data that everything on the map is created from, as well as terrain in this case for this outdoor map. We have our own terrain data from hillshade to the contours that you saw, as well as land cover, which I discussed earlier. So in this Mapbox Streets V8 tile set, that's what this data is called. It's called a tile set. A tile set is just a ton of different vector data layers within a data structure, and here it has very many different data layers. A tile set can just have one data layer. It doesn't need to have as many as this does, but because of how many pieces of data that this data layer has, it made sense to separate them out. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the POI label, because that's what I said I wanted to customize on my own, and just click on that. And when I click on it, it removed everything else from this little data viewing screen, and it's showing me just what's available for this data layer. And if you see in this little upper left-hand corner, the green on the map is showing visible features, so what you currently have visible on the map. And then the red is showing filtered out features. There's no red yet because we have not removed anything. But you can remove items before you place it on the map through this filter feature. And this is kind of part of data-driven styling, because you're really choosing the data that will drive your style. So here, I'm going to create a filter, and filters will be dependent on what your data looks like. So in this case, this particular data set has these attributes that I can filter based on the name or the kind of icon associated. As I mentioned before, Mapbox has Mach-E icons specifically. So for this data set, there's an attribute name called Mach-E. And essentially attributes are like what you would see in an Excel file, and what the column name is. That's kind of what an attribute is for anyone that hasn't worked with sort of spatial related data before. I can filter based off of the class of these points of interest. So the class is how people define their own data as well. So if I click on this and go, and I want to filter based off of class, I can say if something exists, then it'll filter to that. If something is a specific value, it'll filter to that. Or if something is everything but a particular value I don't want to show, that's what is not means. So if I click here, I can go based off of park-like for a class, which is kind of similar to what I talked about before when I was using those sliding toggles. So if I only want to show park-like features and that's it, this is all I have to do to filter that out. If I want to show park-like and visitor amenities, then that'll get added onto the map. Or if I'm going to go ahead and click off none as well. So let's pretend I wanted every possible park-like feature and every possible visitor amenity, then I'm going to stick with this filter. And maybe I also care a lot about the zoom extent, because you can use any of, like if you just added your own data layer, you can choose what zoom extent it's at. This means when you zoom in and out, it'll show up at really high zooms, and these black dots are the data layer that we just added. So a high zoom is when you zoom really far in, and a low zoom is numerically associated with 1, 2, or 3. And you can see in the URL as these zooms, this is the zoom, this like hashtag zoom. As you zoom out, some of those POI, the point of interest, are still visible. Now, having some of your data visible at these lower zooms is really useful. So like state names is really useful, so is country names, but it probably isn't very useful to have some points of interest at this zoom level. Park names is probably good, but I probably don't want visitor amenities to be at that zoom level. So we're going to use data-driven styling again to decide what should show up at what zoom level. So right now, this is just a symbol. So it's just a point, or it's just a circle, not a symbol, but we want to make it into a symbol. A symbol is something that will have an icon associated with it as well as a label. Here we're seeing an icon and name associated with it now that we select a symbol. But if I change it to circle, it's just showing that little dot. So it's nice because in this little data menu, you can really tell the difference there. So then we'll go ahead and go into styling these features, and I'm just gonna zoom in again just to have more of them on the map. I'm scrolling. Maybe I should have just entered into the search bar. That took longer than I thought. Okay, so with the symbols, you may have noticed that the circles showed up right away. Oh gosh, that the circles showed up right away on the map when I selected this data. With symbols, because there are kind of a lot of ways that it can be symbolized, you actually do need to add a label yourself if you want it to be labeled, because not everyone wants symbols to be labeled. Some people just want the symbol itself. So that's why it's not showing up as labeled. And the icon space is where you can add the symbology. So just to quickly show you what you can do, you can, again, add your own custom icon through upload images, but I'm just gonna go ahead and use some of these already existing icons just to do it quickly so you can see it. And I'll just choose this little bar icon. And now these parks and visitor amenities all have this little bar icon. I will look up a park icon so that makes more sense. Park. Or maybe a green dog. I'll just give it a dog park icon. It's green, so that's a little more associative with the symbol. So what I was just talking about was I want only some of these to show up at lower zooms. So you can, for data-driven styling, use zoom. You can style something across a zoom range, which means you can control how it's seen at different zooms and filter things out how you want them to be filtered. You also can style across a data range. This is really great for data sets that are numerical. So a great example is like rainfall. If you have something that has very concrete number ranges, you would use styling across a data range to make specific decisions of, oh, from 0 to 10, I want to show it for this, show this at a very particular color. From 10 to 20, I want to show this at a particular color. And then styling across data conditions is something that you can still use for numeric values, but is really great for values that aren't numeric. So things like election results. So Republican, Democrat, Independent. This is a great space to style something based off of non-numeric values. And you also can do a lot more complicated work there as well. But going into style across zoom range, you will have a pop-up of zoom 0, which is just the automated space for the lowest zoom level. And I'm gonna go ahead and remove a symbol for zoom 0. And then I'm going to go in and change this to zoom 6 for when this will pop up. And to filter out the amenities entirely, because I only want to show the visitor amenities, I can just go in here and remove that. So now, actually I'm gonna make this a little more extreme and make it zoom 15. So I'll have these symbols, I'll have these symbols only show up at the higher zooms. So I'm going to zoom out a little just so you see it like disappeared. And besides checking the URL for what zoom level we're at, oh gosh, that zoomed out a lot. Sorry, my internet's like kind of slow based off of this call. Besides checking the URL, you can check this little menu bar up here. And as you can see, these symbols no longer showed up in the park areas, but if I zoom in a little more, there should be some symbols popping up. At least there should be. Sorry that my internet got very slow. Oh, wow. Well, this is what happens when you do things live. I accidentally deleted the symbol. I just re-added it and it should show up now. All right. So that is a general overview of how to do something quickly with data-driven styling. And you can, I hope that you take the time to kind of explore that a little because it's really fun. And you can add your own data sets by adding new layer and uploading data. And you do need to check what kind of data you're adding. You can add a GeoJSON, which is a particular file that is built on code, and that is spatially oriented, or you can upload a shapefile, which is kind of the industry standard of spatial data, or a CSV file, which is kind of the easiest and really great for point data. And I do this all the time. If I have a set of places I really want to highlight on a map, like all you have to do is make an Excel file, add a lat long column, a latitude column, and a longitude column, and get the latitude and longitude for the places you want to highlight. So if it's like some of your favorite bars or favorite restaurants, you would just add those to an Excel file and export it out as a CSV, a comma separated value file, and upload it here, and you'd be able to just add it on the map right away. Cool. So I'm gonna take a step away from explaining Mapbox and kind of finally do a deeper dive into what conceptual cartography is and how you can kind of think about creating your own map styles so that you can take what you just learned in Mapbox Studio and also learn some design decisions along the way to kind of make your own really customized pieces. So conceptual design is really just the early phase of any design process. It's where we're all creating sort of sketches and models of what we want to create. So conceptual cartography is when we're kind of seeing what inspired us to make a particular style or map, whether it's like a customer request or something like mood boards, in the case that I'll be describing, like Halloween type maps, sketches, gathering data, and other such iterations. All of them kind of fall into this conceptual cartography or conceptual design space. And I'm gonna be talking about recreating aesthetics for this, in particular Halloween type aesthetic. I made this Tim Burton based map last year, and I just thought it'd be a great sort of map to discuss now, especially when we're on Halloween sort of month feels. The aesthetic pieces here really were the typeface, which is really reminiscent of Nightmare Before Christmas, and a lot of the pattern work in this map. So in terms of the conceptual design phase, I kind of break that down into two different things for aesthetic research. I break down aesthetic visuals based off of my own perspective because ultimately I'm going to be the one recreating these and I'm the one defining how it feels for wanting to make it. But in the case of something that has easily been defined and researched by many others, I knew that there would be research on what his work was in the same way that Van Gogh has people defining his work and what it looks like. So I also did some research on how other people have defined it so that I could see if there's any anything I could pull from there as well beyond just my observations. So when I'm doing aesthetic research, I personally create a verbal description of what I'm seeing so that I also have a verbal association to really solidify what I'm seeing visually. And that helps me be able to try to recreate it later. And I call this aesthetic elements. And aesthetic elements are really useful for maps, especially if I'm going to pull this into a map, because maps are all can be broken down into points, lines, and polygons. And those are all small aesthetic elements. So it's kind of a good parallel to being able to break down what you're seeing in anything you're trying to recreate into aesthetic elements. So like line work, color, patterns. And in terms of Tim Burton's work, what I wrote down after doing that research, he has consistent repetition of whorls, stripes, seams, a lot of asymmetry, a lot of high contrast, sort of a general sense of like jagged, tilted, and alternated things all put together, which kind of result in a visual disjointedness. I'm sure anyone who really loves Tim Burton, like I do, knows that's kind of the way his work looks. So I then kind of categorized those verbal descriptions with visual descriptions that I like screen captured and grouped together. And so these are just some examples of what I assessed. On the upper left, there's some fills that are made with markers, and they're all like line fills. So it's not like the way that you would fill something in with a marker completely. It's actually like some slow, meticulous like line creations across. And it's really well highlighted in that staircase example. The black really shows that he used a lot of small line strokes to actually create a full fill. And he does that a lot in his artwork. And he makes a lot of scribble line fills as well, which is that lower central piece that is like that's technically a mouth that's filled in. And in his artwork and in his movies, you see a lot of these like really whirly, sort of swirly pieces. So I knew that was definitely a pattern I wanted to pull in my map. And then he also often has a lot of thick line pattern fills. So like on the left, those examples there, and these were often black or reddish. I didn't end up using all of these in the map, but it was a really good idea for me to just test and see what worked. And I'll also just have like a lot of stuff to pull from, because you really can recreate a general sense of a style or an aesthetic really just with 2 or 3 elements, but it's good to have a few different elements to pull from so you can personally decide what looks best for what you're feeling like it should look like. And then I just kind of, this is another example of like all the verbal research I wrote down. And I just spent time kind of writing down other people's thoughts and my own observations and kind of putting them together. And I also kind of created a visual sketch. And none of you need to do all of these things. These are just things that I have found really useful when I'm breaking down visuals, because having a lot of different ways of looking back and referencing when I'm trying to recreate these things, it just made it easier for me to have it all kind of categorized like that, or I'm just a hyper organized person. So this is going to be like a more complicated process that people don't need to do all of these things, but I wanted to just show how different softwares can kind of be pulled together to create a particular vision in a map in Mapbox. I will talk about how to do something much more quickly after this, but this is a good just like sort of overall discussion of how the sort of conceptual design phase works until the final bit. So here I just was testing how I could recreate those imperfect lines. And I have a graphic tablet, and I also have the software called Corel Painter, and it just emulates the way different textures are in paintbrushes or pens, but on screen. So I didn't need to do it by hand and scan it, which is just another way that this could have been done. And I, oh, this is just a slide reminding everyone that like you don't have to do the exact process that I did. And I pulled that into Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, because Adobe Illustrator lets you do this thing called image trace. And what that does is it can trace, basically, it'll trace any image, and it's through a sort of automated process. So not every image will be traced maybe how you want it to be done, but it's really great for like things that don't have that many colors, because it will be basically an exact trace. And the trace is important because it's tracing it into a vector format. And as I mentioned before, images uploaded into Mapbox Studio should be vector pieces, SVGs, so that they can expand or contract really easily and not be pixelated. So that was why I pulled it into Adobe Illustrator for SVG testing. And from this point, I knew that I wanted to make some of these into a pattern, especially that whirl pattern, because Tim Burton, honestly, I think so many people recognize that map because of the whirl pattern, because we're so used to seeing it in his work. So I took that tracing that I had created, and again in Adobe Illustrator, I just used something in that software that allows you to test patterns. So it lets you see how things tessellate. So if something's not tessellating perfectly, you can move things around. And that's kind of what that second image is showing. That's technically what ended up tessellating perfectly. And I used the pattern maker to test that. So on the right is the final pattern, which got pulled into the map. So that is, it looks like obviously that could have all been done by hand, but what it technically is just like a really repeated pattern. So I did that. I tested a lot of different patterns, but ultimately what I ended up pulling into the Tim Burton map was this pattern on the left, which is that water pattern I described. And I did make the administrative boundaries and the roads a particular pattern because Tim Burton is well known for so much of his kind of imperfect line work. So I just wanted to also pull in patterns for the line work as well. That's not necessary. You definitely don't need to pull in all these patterns for maps that you make, but if you're trying to be creative, it's definitely like a fun thing to do. And all I had to do for that map, the main pieces really were those patterns. So I pulled the patterns in through that custom upload images that I discussed earlier. And then I went to the individual layer that I wanted to upload them into. So with a water pattern, it was a water layer. And in the pattern area in the menu, I just added the pattern there, and it was that easy. Of course, for this map, I did make the land black, and I made like the font a very particular way. But that really was like, it didn't take that much longer to change the font. So with that, I just am going to show some quick analysis of some Halloween images, and then we can dive into Studio. And maybe if you have Studio open, you'll be able to walk along. Otherwise, hopefully, I hope you explore it later, because these are definitely not as complicated as the pattern stuff that I just discussed. So maybe you noticed, perhaps with the Tim Burton map, I really like Halloween and I really like horror movies. These two books are gifts that one of my sisters gave me. And I thought, kind of, because I was talking about that Tim Burton map, I thought it'd be fun, and because it's October, to analyze sort of the aesthetics from Pan's Labyrinth and from this Art of Horror book, to try to come up with some ideas. So the Pan's Labyrinth book is really cool. It just has so many visuals and lots of really colorful images, and of course kind of scary, creepy looking things. And I just started snapping photos of things that kind of popped out to me so that I could kind of categorize it as I went through. And I just noticed there was, of course, quite a lot of red, but there was so much green in this movie. And I think Guillermo del Toro really loves lush sort of greens, but I never really noticed as much. I've seen this movie a few times as some of his other movies as well. I didn't notice how often he paired greens and reds. You can see that she's wearing green here, and then she's wearing a different green here, and she's holding this red book, and she's holding these red rocks, and she's holding that red cloth there. And of course, this is all tinged in red, and this was red in the movie posters. And then in that Halloween book, of course, red is so prominent in sort of scary Halloween items, so that's not that weird. But I thought it was interesting. Oops. The first page of the book was this like really lime green, vibrant page, and right next to it was this very red piece. And it was just interesting to see that paralleled again. because it was completely different than the Guillermo del Toro book. And it just got me thinking, like, I know that red and green are complementary colors. So a complementary color, if you don't think about color that much, is really just their opposite colors on the color wheel. So as this greatly illustrates, red and green, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Red and green are just honestly the most commonly thought of complementary colors. And I just thought it was more interesting because we associate red and green with Christmas so much. But honestly, Halloween and horror also use green and red quite a lot, a fair amount. As you can see in these movie posters, there's red in this font. There's like a nice sort of tealy sort of green there. There's red in this dress and sort of a greenish tin skeleton. Dracula is green here rather than red. There's this green sort of painted creepy face alongside red font. Beyond red and green, there's definitely quite a bit of other color use, of course, with red being a highlight, but quite a bit of like black and white too, which I think we also definitely associate scary things with black and white, because night is black. When you can't see color at night, you're kind of mostly seeing in desaturated colors or in a way black and white. And we're seeing that, sorry, my mouse keeps clicking. We're seeing that here in this illustration. So that was just like another sort of observation I made while I was flipping through these books. And then there's such a wide variety of typefaces throughout that horror book. But what stuck out to me, and probably because it's so highly associated anyway with Halloween, like the way we're used to seeing things talked about with Halloween, I noticed so much typeface, so many different typefaces used, were this kind of like scratchy, like imperfect, kind of like you're writing on the wall, you're digging it into something typefaces. I just created a little mood board of these of these items. So the red and green was really prominent, and as I noticed, there's quite a bit of black and white repetition, and then that scratchy font and like a fair bit of yellow for the typeface in the font. So I knew I wanted to make a map, or 3 maps maybe, or 2 maps, or one that highlighted one of these color schemes and definitely used a typeface like this. So this is an example of such a map. This map, using Studio, after I found a typeface that worked, it took me a minute to make. So it could take you a minute to make a map like this if you really want to quickly make something for fun. And I'm going to go over with you now how to do that. In Studio, as I noted before, there are all these templates that you can use to start based off of what your need is. And since I just noticed that those colors are so predominantly used, the green, the red, and also black and white, I do want to make one that, at least initially, that really is just highlighting one color. So I'm going to go into this monochrome template and go ahead and customize it. Click customize, I mean. Okay, I'm going to navigate to different city, I know. And you may notice I'm doing that a lot, and it's just really nice when you're working on a map, when you can see so many things at a different global scale and you want to test things. It's good to test in an area you know, because then you know if something's showing up or not showing up, or if you really want to look at a particular feature, you can quickly pan and zoom to it and get to it, so you know, like, oh, I want to test what parks look like, or oh, I want to test what rivers look like. You know exactly where they are, so it won't take you that long to pan and zoom. So I'm just going, I went to Madison, Wisconsin because I lived there for 6 years. So the monochrome template, as I mentioned before, is completely based off of one color. So the entire color relationship of this map is based off of just one color. So I am going to do the green, and I selected green here, and this is definitely a nice sort of like seafoam green, kind of a relaxing green. And I could also choose a more sort of foresty toned green that also looks really nice and maybe could be good for horror as well, depending on what I add to it. But I kind of want to make it feel like a little grungy and vibrant. And I'm gonna pull this, there's this like little bar, I can like pull this in different directions to change the hue, and that will adjust it slightly. So I just pulled it a little to the left so that it was kind of in between yellow and green, and this kind of made it feel like a little grungy and dirty green. So I'm gonna stick with this color because this kind of feels like a vomit chartreuse green that could be horrifying. It just feels like a good sort of zombie feel, maybe. So honestly, you could add your Halloween related data onto this map right away. And if your data and like what you're showing, like if the labels say like Halloween store, like it'd be pretty clear what the meaning is. But I'm going to add a different font. So you can use so many different fonts that come with Studio, but in cases like this, it is good to find a font that really works for your aesthetic. So what I did was I looked up some free Halloween fonts that I could use. And I also, so what I Googled was, sorry, there's like, I don't know if there's like a control screen for the Zoom call. Sorry about that. So I just Googled Halloween fonts free for commercial use because it's important to to use fonts that are free for commercial use or free for personal use. If you're gonna add stuff to a map for your own business, it definitely needs to be free for commercial use. And then if you're gonna add a free font that is for your own personal use, then just search free font for personal use. So I searched this and found this, and this gave me a bunch of different options, and I downloaded the green fuzz option and the phantom fingers option. And I already uploaded these, but if you are doing this right now and following along, or uploading any other font that you might have that you really like, even if it's not a Halloween font, all you have to do is just like the images for custom pieces, you just upload new font here, and here I already did it. So these fonts have been uploaded. So here's the Phantom Fingers font, and here's the Green Fuzz font. So I also am going to make some decisions in this map, and I think I don't want points of interest at all. I just want to share this map with my friends, honestly, and tell them I made a cool Halloween map. And I don't really care about like restaurants or like other like things that are within points of interest. So I just turn that off, which you can turn that back on as you want, but I'm going to keep it turned off. So I'm just basically at this point decluttering the map. It's really good to think about what you want to include and what you don't want to include on a map, because it just helps. It helps with load time if it's an online map, but it also just helps really focus on whatever the idea or design of your map is. So natural features, I'm going to turn off as well. I think I'll also turn off buildings. I'm just trying to make this a pretty simple map. I'll keep the road network because I think that adds some nice texture, and I'm going to talk to you guys about adding in red to the roads in a little bit. And I'll also turn off this transit one. So that already has, for load time, that will help, and it has decluttered my map. I don't need to think about designing for those items at all. So now the fun part of changing the typography. So I'm going to go to minor cities, and I think I want, if you forget what a font looks like that you uploaded, or if you forget an image that you uploaded, you can go check them here. I forgot what looked like what, So I want the phantom finger. So I'm just going to scroll. It'll automatically be added immediately. So I'm just going to add that. And here you can see some pieces changed. Major cities and minor cities are separated out. That's because in a lot of cartographic design, you'll have different types of labels to help emphasize or de-emphasize kind of creating a visual hierarchy of your features. So that's why these are separated here, because that really will help for anyone who may be trying to do something a little more complicated. It's nice to be able to customize like the hierarchy of place labels in those cases. So I'll also change major cities. I don't care about creating a visual hierarchy here. I actually want them to all be the same. So I will add phantom fingers to that. I'll zoom out a little more. And here you can also see that visual hierarchy, even in the color, like Madison being a bigger city, automatically has a slightly different color. And again, if that's something that you want to change and you don't want that, if you want everything to be the exact same color in terms of place labels, you can go into layers and change that. So I could go into settlement major label, go into the color option here, and I would just override that, and I could change the color. So that would change it. But I'm going to just keep that. But again, just to remind everyone that if you don't like any of the automation that exists, you can easily customize it more. But I'll just keep it like that. And I don't like the way with this particular font, because of how tall it is, it doesn't look as nice with that little stacked portion. So I am going to go ahead and edit this. So another nifty thing while you're working in Studio is you can click on the map and it'll tell you what's on the map underneath your click. So here I know that there's land and water underneath the map, as well as place labels in the road network. And it's telling me that the base is there. And if I want to edit a particular data layer, I can just click on the layers tab on that mouse click, and it'll show me also what's underneath the click. So I want to edit this settlement minor label because of that stack. So in order to edit this, all I have to go down to is line height and override that portion. And this is like when you're just going to do some testing based off of what you're seeing, because there's no perfect value for anything. It all depends on what you're adding or like removing. So I'll try 2 to see if I'm happy with that. That looks good, but maybe I'll try 3 just to see what that looks like. No, 3 is a little too distant for me, so I'll keep it at 2 for that particular font. I also, at least for these smaller labels, I'm going to change the text spacing, so the spacing between each letter, because I feel like that'll help a little bit with legibility. So I'll see what one is obviously way too spaced out. So maybe I'll try 0.1. That looks better. I'm pretty happy with that. And I think I'd like it if this wasn't on 2 different lines. So this max width feature is nice because you can stack longer labels, which is really useful in some map uses, especially when there's a lot of stuff on the map. But again, this map for me is mostly all about the place labels and kind of making it feel like Halloween. So I'm gonna see if I can get that on 1 line for some of these labels. So maybe I have to go beyond 10. There we go. So I just like having it not stacked. So I'll try that. And then I'm going to change this settlement major label to be similar to minor. It is styled automatically as slightly bigger. So the stacking may not be exactly the same, but I'll just match the values, which if you want to exactly match what you just changed in one label, like line height or letter spacing, if it's something a little more complicated, like if it was like a color relationship, if you do some coding, you also can go into the edit JSON area and copy and paste. just FYI, if you do any coding. And if I wanted to change the color scheme to match, I could copy this and like put it into the major bit there. But I'm just gonna leave it there so I can go ahead and keep chatting about other stuff. While I'm here in the layers, I noticed that there are neighborhood layer labels showing up, and I don't care about those for this. And I actually also don't care about road labels. So if I click on what's on the map, it'll take me to the layer, and I'm gonna also turn that off. So now all the labels that are displaying on the map immediately are exactly what I wanted. So this looks nice, but and it's popping a little bit, but I think it could pop more. And because of what I talked about with that red and green color relationship, I am going to add roads in just to add some visual fun. Again, if you're designing for any particular purpose, you'll definitely be thinking about how you want to add in or remove pieces from the color palette, but this is just for fun, so it doesn't matter what I'm adding or removing. And I want to add red. Like I noted before, they are complementary colors, and as those two books showed, those are used a lot together in Halloween schemes, so this is kind of a great option to make something pop. Obviously, this pinky toned red kind of doesn't look great, so I'm just going to play around with what I think might be a good red. Obviously, a vibrant blood sort of red could be cool for a Halloween map, but because I made that green color kind of dingy, I think I should desaturate this red a little bit as well. And see how that looks. This is still looking a little too pink toned to me. I'm gonna zoom in a little more. So, oh, and when I say desaturated, desaturation is that's like in this space, pulling it more to the left. And you also can control that in this like S value right here. You can increase saturation by increasing the number and decrease saturation by making it 0. So that's a gray. Sometimes actually this looks pretty good. I often can spend quite a bit of time trying to find the perfect color match. What also is really useful too is to look at the lightness and darkness. Sometimes if something is too light and too dark, that'll be obvious on the map, but you can see how much you might need to lower something. So if I had this red at 70, which is a lot of lightness, that looks pretty like vibrating on the screen, and it's definitely a little too bright to match here. And by checking to see the lightness or darkness of the base map or whatever colors may be underneath, I can match it a little better. So if I could like make it exactly match with 48, but it's also nice to have a little bit of contrast sometimes. And I did really like the way it was looking before, just a little bit darker. So I'll keep it there. And this could be like a fun map just to use for in non-COVID times to highlight where the best trick-or-treat houses are for your kids or for the neighborhood kids. Or it'd be like just a fun thing to add symbology on for like adding pumpkins for exploring your neighborhood, like your favorite restaurants, and just using a pumpkin to symbolize that. And it is almost 3:30 DC time, so I am going to pass on the presentation to Johnny so that he can also go ahead and show you all the exciting stuff he has to talk about. Feel free to write me on Twitter, or I'm sure Matt from Gray Area can also extend my email if anyone has any questions. I'm very happy to answer anything if you feel like something needs more clarification. Bye.
Hi everyone, let me try and share my screen. I'm hoping you should be able to see a presentation. Fingers crossed you can see this kind of a black background keynote presentation. So, hi, my name's Johnny. I live in the UK. I'm a cartographer with Mapbox. I previously worked at Tableau software. So that's how I kind of got into Mapbox. Mapbox sort of is built in to Tableau in terms of their mapping functions. And I started to really experiment with Studio and trying to really push it and see where I could kind of push it and get the kind of aesthetic maps and the cartographic kind of quality that I wanted or wanted to try and improve on personally. So there I am. That's my Twitter handle at Johnny Walker. Yes, that is my real name. I hope nobody's laughing at that. It's a blessing and a curse. So these were actually all things that were done with Mapbox Studio, and then they were built in Tableau Public. Actually, that was the team I worked for. So if you've not heard of Tableau Public before, it's a free piece of software. You can use that. You can go and download that for free, and then you can add do a whole load of other analysis, etc., and bring in some of your Mapbox maps and styles into that. Other BI software is available, and yeah, I just better say that before legally wise. But it was really just to push home the beauty of what I found out about Mapbox Studio was this really simple to use, flexible, custom map design that is, as Vanessa had said, it's kind of like Adobe. You know, there's layers and you can move them above each other in a hierarchy, and you can add your own things. And it was that grabbed me, and then I started to realize the potential of this thing. And it's also flexible, online, adaptable, rotatable, and it's instant, you know. And I sort of kind of saw this Mapbox Studio, and went, I really want to do some of those maps that other people are doing, or try to, and sort of go, hey, I want to create some really cool looking maps and try and see whether this was possible. So I just started to play around whilst I was working at Tableau with some kind of mapping designs and mapping data visualizations. And this was one of them. I was very lucky that I got one of the best maps of 2019 for the Ordnance Survey in the UK, and Mapbox were very nice about it as well. But this was about plastic pollution in the Aegean Sea around Greece. Virtually everything map-based there is done in Mapbox Studio. The rest, some of the interactive charts, etc., and the text and some of the other icons were done via Tableau Public. Like I say, it's free. You can go download that and kind of try and build some of these kind of things. But my idea with this was to try and talk about this conceptual part of the cartography. So what I wanted to do was try and evoke the spirit of the Mediterranean and the Aegean. So things like playing around with the sea color and playing around with things like the land color. I'll show you how to do some of these things in a minute, but it was really to kind of use that as a way to kind of tell the story and how the styling can aid your cartography, or perhaps the story that you're kind of trying to tell, evoking a place, an environment, and using that conceptually in your cartography. This was another example that I used Tableau for, and then all the mapping is Mapbox. This was to do with bioluminescence in different kind of creatures, animals, plants around the sort of kind of southernish part of Australia, southeast coast area. So in there, I don't know, there's loads of things. There's fish and bioluminescent mushrooms and all sorts of things. But this was a bit of a play on trying to style something. Well, okay, so these things glow for humans anyway. They tend to glow at night. That's when we see them. So I wanted to style this map as if it was nighttime, perhaps with some sort of evening glow on some of the top of the hills there, the orange kind of shading. And then also it was really just to try and use the cartographic technique that John Nelson from Esri uses, kind of created, sort of the firefly technique. So in here, actually, in some of the data, there are some fireflies. So why not use this cartographic sort of technique to show off things that are glowing? Great, I'll use that technique. Brilliant, thank you. And Mapbox kind of gave me that ability to do that. So it's this concept behind styling, the flexibility of Mapbox Studio, and then the concept of styling to match your story, your subject matter, or your environment. And it's just something that I love playing with. It's like a visual metaphor. But that wouldn't be that possible. Well, it wouldn't have been with me using a simple, easy to use, flexible tool like Mapbox, and it's free. So that's one of the other examples. Whoa. Wondering why my keyboard won't move. Let's see if this will work instead. The other thing as well was really to do with things like times of day. This was an example. It's Mount Baker in the US, and I really wanted to use some styling to show off the daytime. So the top example there, you know, it was kind of like the green nature of the mountains, and then wanted to really kind of change some of the settings, the colors, to move it down more towards the sunset, and so you could kind of get that glowing feeling on different aspects of the mountain ridges, and then take it completely to the opposite end and perhaps have it like moonlight. So it was just trying to sort of take those colors as well, or yeah, that inspiration, that concept of daytime, using the ability of Mapbox to change those kind of things. And perhaps it's the way that you might want to tell your story. If it's something about nighttime, perhaps use a map that's styled in a nighttime fashion. Again, this is something else that I've been doing, looking at, same thing again, really. It's about day and night, looking at different ways of showing off some of the glow features. It's kind of like that firefly technique as well, in terms of showing off glow, in terms of where cities are in the US at nighttime. It could be sort of more, the top example there was more an example of kind of like a moonlight going from lighter blue through to very dark on the east coast of the US. And then I tried to sort of kind of do one where it was almost daytime on the east coast, Seattle, Los Angeles side, and then it sort of kind of fades in. So there's ways to kind of do that kind of thing in Mapbox. And it was that kind of thing, this concept again of how the styling can aid your storytelling, or emphasize your analysis, or tell your story. This is another one I did. There's a bit of a mix of things here. There's some techniques on lines there. So it's again kind of the glowing lines. Everything there except the text and the thing up in the top left, the area of interest map. This was actually, so this was just a screenshot from Studio. The map is completely from Mapbox Studio. And then I just put it in Keynote, actually, and just added a few bits of text. It was somebody that just said, well, can you do something that looks okay in Keynote? And I was just like, yeah, sort of, yeah. But again, this is, this is bird flights. Again, it's kind of using the line, glowing line technique. It's almost like that firefly glow line technique that you might see. Also in there is some other styling techniques on some population data that is extruded. So those little spiky bits are green in this particular case, and then there's some shadows as well. So I play around a little bit with some of the styling. In this particular case, again, it was more evoking an environment, kind of like the swampland of the south of New Orleans. And so it was based around using greens and kind of setting that back, making the birds glow. They're the focus, but at the same time, I wanted to see how they related to areas of population. So yeah, evoking that environment through styling. And then, yeah, so a little sneaky peek here. This one, you're very, very lucky to get this. So this is using Mapbox Studio, but coming very, very soon, there is going to be the ability to enable everybody to use 3D things. So this is part of the Pacific Crest Trail. Few very, very, very famous mountains there, but it's something that you're going to be able to combine all the ability of Mapbox Studio and the styling ability, and then enhance it with some of the kind of 3D terrain and things like that. You must still use Studio. You've got to use Studio. It's the way that you enable the style and the function. But this is something that's going to come up very, very soon. But again, this is kind of, I love Studio. It's just, I just absolutely, totally love it. And without it, this would kind of look kind of boring. There's a lot of little tricks in there with Studio and certain kind of styling techniques, colors, but also things like contours and that valley there. It's using the contour layer in there, and it's styled so it kind of looks a bit misty. So, you know, loads of little tweaks and little things that you can still bring through and into the 3D, which is, that's just awesome. Can't wait for people to be able to play with that. This is another example. Again, it's this is me emulating one of my heroes and trying to explore what's possible again in Studio. Again, this is, yeah, the 3D certainly gives it some oomph, and it really, really does. But it's not possible without doing some of this stuff in Mapbox Studio. So there's a gentleman called Eric Knight. Look him up if you like maps. His maps for National Geographic. In fact, he's also in Vanessa's Atlas of Design this year. So check that out as well. But he is just literally, it's incredible. His mapping work is just ridiculously beautiful. It's incredible. And I wanted to try and recreate this in Studio. So there's loads of little tricks in there. There's little things that I've added, little dots for little highlights. I've added some little areas and shape files for trying to emphasize some of the glaciers and the shine, or the sort of lighter or darker in certain aspects. And then using Mapbox Studio to get some of those curved labels. They're sort of kind of custom labels that you can create your own data set in directly in Studio, so that then you can then bring them in and enhance your cartography. So there's places that I always go to for things, and if you want to have a play around, I'm probably going to use a couple of layers in the next demonstration. One of them, well, I just love this website anyway. It's just Natural Earth. To me, it just has this, it's incredible that it's free. I still don't understand how it is without them. I think you can go in and help and donate. Please do if you can. But it amazes me that some of the information that they have there. So things like, I don't know, you know, rivers at different kind of scales, and all sorts of different geographical, physical geography, human geography layers. It's a really good little adventure playground to go in and sort of try and use it as the experiments for certain kind of styles and things like that. I'll probably use just one of them. Actually, it's not even a physical data set. I think it's actually just there's one called Populated Places, but it's just an interesting point file that just kind of is interesting to show off some of the capabilities in Studio. But just want to doff my cap to them and the information that's there. You know, there's so much. One of the other things I probably will use today is something I used to work for Tableau Public. They've got a few resources. There's some sample data on there. The top one there, okay, it's from 2016, but again, it's worldwide undersea communication cables. Sounds dull, doesn't it? That does. It's dull, really. But I'll probably use that one just to show off some of the line glow effects. It's there, it's free. You can go in, you can download the data set from the Tableau public website just so you can go in and explore and play. But they've got loads of other data sets on there that are interesting anyway. And they are my old employer. Still love them. So I will now go into Mapbox Studio, and whether you follow along or not, up to you. But some of the ways that I use Studio, it's a bit different actually probably to Vanessa. And the one thing I would very strongly stress is using the existing styles. So let me get, I can't see that thing. Using these styles here is, I would strongly advise using them, and you'll probably in time realize why. And it's because there's so much work that's gone into them with regards to data-driven styling. It's exactly what Vanessa was saying with regards to things like zoom levels for your text or labeling, and so many other aspects that are so important when using them, particularly within, you know, another application. You'll probably soon see why that is. There's so much hard work gone into them. The components are much more easier and quicker to use and style. And I would certainly stress starting with those, and you'll probably end up using those and then tweaking them down the line. But I'll show you how. What I'm going to do actually is ignore all that, but I was going to start with a blank template, and it's just because, hello?
If you're showing Studio right now, it looks like people only can see Keynote, just in case. But okay. If you haven't switched windows yet, then never mind.
Let me, that should be better, hopefully. Okay, sorry. So yes, I would very, very strongly advise using these templates. Like I say, there's so much hard work gone into them. There's so many clever things in there that you will never realize until a little bit further down the line. I certainly made mistake after mistake after mistake, and then realized that I should probably have just used those to begin with. It can save you a lot of time. They're much more adaptable, flexible than you possibly ever could imagine. However, for this, I think for this demonstration, what I was going to do was just start with a blank template, and it was just to show, really just to sort of focus on some of the layers, and just so that you can see them easily and simply in the hierarchy. So I will just start with a customized blank template. And I'm just going to go straight to layers. I won't talk about components at the moment, but it was just to add a couple of layers, a couple of cool layers, and a couple of the little techniques that I like to sort of try and play with. And it's using very, very few layers, but and these are built in Mapbox layers. So one of the first ones I was going to do, actually one of the coolest little tips, you'll have to ignore all the stuff that I've got on here. But one of the coolest things is just straight away, you can start to type in here, little search function. I want to add the satellite layer. You know, I love playing with this anyway. I love the look of it, and I should just stop already. I just explore this thing all the time, constantly. I use this a lot as a base layer. I don't know why. I just love it so much. It's just sort of, isn't it? It's just wonderful because satellite layers anyway. So there you go, satellite layer, straight first one in. I'm going to go back and add another one. And this time it should sit, I think it sits under, no, I'm just going to type in terrain. So there's a couple of versions of terrain in here. I'll get told off for this because this can be quite resource heavy, this one, but terrain RGB, I'm going to add that one. and again, it's kind of pulled up the preview screen, and I'll go to style up at the top. And you hoping what you can actually see there is it's kind of added this terrain layer. If I just actually hide that, you'll probably see the difference there. But the beauty of this layer to me just is in terms of the way that you can kind of try and make things stand out a bit more, perhaps make it look a little bit more 3D. But some of the styling aspects on here, the intensity here is set at 0.5 already. We could just bump that up. And you'll probably see that what it's actually really done now is just gone, whoa, it's just like gone to crazy intensity. That's really cool, but it is quite heavy in terms of the resources. But it's just a really nice way to kind of bump and get some terrain data in there, particularly around some of the hillier bits over here. Wonderful, the Himalayas and other places. So, you know, two things straight away that are really simple, really quick, inbuilt Mapbox layers where you can start to play with the way that things look. The other thing that I really love to do with this, and it's very simple again, is the styling on the satellite layer. There's the opacity there. I mean, actually, you just can drop the opacity, just start playing. So what's happening there is there's no background, but it wouldn't view that way if you published it into one of your applications. But there's just some really fun things just to do by dropping. I mean, you could actually just hide the satellite layer and it would still show the same thing instead of dropping the opacity. But I'll bring the opacity back up. But one of the things I love doing is in terms of things like sort of kind of styling in terms of the Firefly cartographic technique, or perhaps making something look like the nighttime, is just literally to drop the saturation. Saturation there straight down to 0, and you've got a black and white map. So you can really kind of start to make your data pop with some really simple, simplistic, you know, easy controls that are within some of the layers there. Other people like it a little bit higher than that. I don't know, something like 0.85, or I don't know what. Some people, all people like different things. But it's just about the stylistic control that you can have over this thing. Straight away, just like being able to just mess about with the saturation is just unbelievable. I'll just set it to 0 anyway at the moment, not -0. The other thing, you know, there is contrast in there. You can really bump this thing up and it's just going to go crazy, or you can really knock it down and it's going to go even more crazy. But I'm just excited by that. I don't know whether anybody else is. Perhaps you're not. You're all very quiet. It's because you're all on mute. But it's just the ability just to explore, play, experiment. And yeah, I'm just happy with that already, actually. There you go. You can have that for free. 2 layers. There you go. Free. Beautiful. And there's the brightness as well. You know, you can go a bit crazy just with some of the layers. Just with that one layer and some of these controls in here. The other thing that I love to do is on top of this layer is just to add another inbuilt one. And I will just search for water this time. And I think it appears in Mapbox Street. So water. So what you'll see again here is in the preview, the green bit is the visible feature. So that's what we've added. But the beauty here is just really, you know, simplistic things. So what it's done now is it's made the ocean black. But, you know, I don't know, perhaps you don't want the ocean, you just want the land, and you can make it white. Just simple as that, make it white. But, you know, perhaps that fits in with the rest of the background color of your visualization, and you need a map, or with the background color of your newspaper page. You know, and I mean, anything, if you want to go that sort of beautiful FT light, sort of paley color is there, done. But the thing that I like playing with this is the way that it interacts with some of the other layers. So in terms of the sea turtle visualization that I showed before, it's starting to play around with getting different sea colors, and then perhaps really knocking back the opacity, so that what you can actually see is the satellite imagery underneath, and you can really go crazy with it. So you start to get some of the land, well, sorry, so some of the ocean detail that starts to come through, particularly around somewhere like islands, or you start to get that really nice sort of ocean color that comes through on the coast, or from perhaps a river, or around a beautiful little Mediterranean island. So you can, with just those sort of 3 layers, it's just about the adaptability and flexibility. I'll just take it to some sort of a crazy green, and you know, you can really play around with this thing and adapt the styling. So I just love doing that. It's simple as that. 3 inbuilt Mapbox layers, and yeah, I spend way too long playing around with the different color, the opacity, the everything, depending on the kind of look and feel I want to get. But it's just having them there, and that's simple. So the other aspect to some of the terrain, let me knock this back because I won't have it as, let's have it as white. The other aspect with some of the terrain that you can do, I actually, just one thing generally in Studio. So if we go into that terrain layer there, there's all sorts of different things that you can do on it. So there's the shadow color there, there's the highlight color, and there's an accent color. So using the terrain layer, so you might want the highlight color, actually, it's just take it to red. It looks crazy already, but you know, with some very subtle shading, you might want to make it something that's a little colder, or so you might want to make it a little bluer, or something along those lines. Perhaps the highlight color isn't the right one in this particular case, so we will just make that white again. Oh, and by the way, if you make a mistake, there's the wonderful thing up here, the history. I do this all the time. So you literally have step by step. Oh no, I changed that color and I can't get it back to what it was. I really preferred that last step, or the 3 steps before. You can go on here and you can literally just Command Z, or undo those things, or redo them just by selecting them and redoing them. That's something that has saved me so much time. Just the fact that you have something there, the ability to undo. Which reminds me, I should probably redo some of those things. I've just got rid of a load of interesting things, haven't I? I'll just do it again. Yes. So the interesting thing about the terrain is the ability to just really kind of shape it. This is the accent color this time, but what I'll actually do is keep those ones the same, and I'll show you why. And this is another thing that's in there. So we'll search for another layer. A lot of people ask me how to do this, but it's just a bit of fun in terms of playing with the design. So there's another terrain layer in there that's called Hillshade. I'm going to bring that through, and it's probably going to look a bit crazy at the moment. It's like, too much black. Okay, so you can bring down the opacity really low, but it just gives that little bit of extra depth to the shadows. But this is where the kind of interesting stuff is, these things here. So styling across a data range, okay, that seems, yeah, that's pretty obvious. You know, if there's some data in the shapefile, CSV, whatever you brought in, you can style things across that data range. But it's worth always exploring what happens with some of the layers with styling with data conditions. It's kind of how Vanessa had said before, it's this kind of data-driven styling. But in here, there's certain things. There's one there that says one of shadow or highlight. So I might click that, and what I actually want is highlight in this case. And what I'm going to do is perhaps give it a little bit of a pink tinge, so it's I don't know, like sunset. That's the way that I kind of look at it. And I'm going to drop that back just because I'm going to make it really, 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 really subtle. But what you can probably see now is the fallback value here is actually the shadow. I don't want that shadow to be that color. And so I can just either make that completely transparent and have the terrain layer with the hillshade on it with that slight pink tinge. I hope you can kind of half see that. But it just kind of gives that little bit of the ability to start and play with different kind of lighting from different angles, etc. So you can really, really play with those things. The other aspect in there that you might have seen was styling across a data condition. There was one of brightness, and I think it's something like 56 is the lowest. So it's the really, really dark bits, and then 94, maybe, if I can't remember. 94 is the lightest bit. So you even have even greater control over the dark, how you might want to style the shadow and the highlights. So always have a look in some of those little things there. Now, the other thing with hillshade is just because it's just I just find this, I love this layer. I'm going to hide that one for now. I'll bring through another one. I'll bring through the same layer, the hillshade again. And I just wanted to show you another technique that a lot of people ask me about as well. And it's probably going to look horrific to begin with, but please bear with me. Oh, the other thing here, I mean, look at the controls. You could set a pattern to it. You can set the opacity. There's a stroke value. I'll just bring that down. Doesn't matter what it is for the moment. But there's the translate function here. Now, this is the one that I really, really, really like, and playing with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to translate that fill, 1 pixel on the X, 1 pixel on the Y. And then what I'm going to do up here is duplicate that. Now that's a super useful little button, the duplicate value. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to make the next one 2 by 2. And please bear with me whilst I type in. I'm just going to 10. I'll be as quick as I can, but hopefully that will sort out the effect that I'm trying to show you. I normally do this about 30 times, but I won't do it 30 just for you guys because that'd be really dull. But also the other point in here is another little a little trick here. So I know it probably appears boring, but I want to show you something that is very useful after duplicating and creating several different layers. Oh, I should have undone that, shouldn't I? Got notifications coming through. Right, 10 by 10. 10. Right, I've translated those. I look at it, it's horrible. This just horrific mess that you can see on the screen there. But one of the things that I want to do is style all those layers in one go. So what I'm going to do is literally just select them all. And what I want to do actually now is group those. So this little icon here, I'm going to group them. I'm just going to call them shadows. That's what they're going to be. But the point now is instead of going individually into all those layers, I can actually style them as a group. So in this particular case, I want to really, 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 really drop the opacity right down. And I'm talking about, 0.03, perfect. I love that. I love the fact that you can do 0.00 something or something. It's like line thicknesses in Studio. I love the ability to be able to do 0.01 thickness of a line thickness. I love that its flexibility in that sense. But hopefully what you can actually kind of see now, it's probably a little bit more apparent over the land here, over the sea, sorry, over the ocean, is I've kind of used that translation and the duplication to kind of create an off shadow. So it's kind of an effect that you see a lot in mapping. It works really well around these little islands where you see them and the shadow is cast. So that's kind of just using the group function and duplication, which is something that I just use all the time. What's interesting on here is, again, because we've got the group sort of highlighted, is the translate anchor. So what I want this thing to do is I want that fill to translate relative to the map, or you can ask it to be relative to the viewport. So I'm going to choose viewport. And then hopefully what you'll see now is when I spin and rotate the map, the shadows should change direction, or perhaps they're not in this particular. Oh, yes, they are. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. You probably hopefully can. Maybe you can like that. They kind of do change direction and change. So in terms of building sort of an interactive map that you want people to pan around, zoom, change, you can really get those shadows to kind of move direction just through a duplication. The other thing it kind of also does is when you kind of zoom out, it adds some depth to some of the geographic areas. So perhaps something like the Himalayas, there's an extra bit of shadow here. You might not be able to see it, but you would notice it if it wasn't there. But it's just building up some of that shadow depth, that kind of effect. So that's kind of just using duplications and groups and styling in that way and having that flexibility and playing around with, yeah, very low opacities sometimes. One of the other things that people often ask me about as well is kind of that kind of glow effect. So I was going to bring in, tell you what I will do is I'll make this background satellite layer black and white, and I'm going to make the water, just in this particular case, dark, because I want to show off the glow effect. So this is where I was going to bring in the file from Tableau Public that I said before. It's the underwater cables. If off the top of my head, what was it called? I can't remember. I thought it was archive something or other. I'll tell you what, I'll find the original one. Let me go and find it. Here it is. It was archive 44. I'm disappointed in myself. Let me get rid of some of these ones because you can obviously see kind of what I've been doing. Again, this is the case of, this is kind of where we were before with the terrain, that kind of black and white feel so that we can really make things pop off the screen. The layer itself, now then, will yeah, let me get rid of these and I'll start just to show you. What was it, archive 44? Please be there. Hooray. So when I bring that in, again, we've got this kind of preview screen. So these are all these underwater cables around the world. And using this glow effect on a line, it's kind of like the glow effect that I used in the Pelican one around New Orleans. Kind of similar kind of effect. But one of the things that I'll do is really just, the first one, I was just going to literally create it as a white line. And this is actually the kind of wrong way around I should do this, but I'll show you anyway, just because I think this is where the magic happens with some of it in terms of duplicating layers and the layer hierarchy and how important that is with regards to this aspect of it. But again, what I'm going to do is keep that opacity at 1. I want it to be totally bright white. I'm probably going to knock the line thickness down in this particular case to something like 0.5 pixels. But all I'm going to do now is duplicate that. So now we've got two versions. We've got one that says copy and the original one. I'm just going to use the bottom one. And I want, this time I want the line thickness to be something like 3. And I'm going to make it just a yellow color. But one of the beautiful things on lines is you can create dashes if you wanted to, a dash line, but there's the blur aspect of it. I just love blurring stuff. I use blur all the time, shadows, all sorts of things. So I've just set that as a line blur. I'm going to duplicate that again. I'm going to use the bottom one again and just keep it this time as some sort of orangey color, make the width a bit more this time, maybe 5. And hopefully what you can start to see is some of that kind of look and feel kind of building up. I might want to knock back some of the opacity on some of these. It just helps with regards to sort of getting that white. The white thin layer on the top is the one that really, really makes it pop and stand out. Again, I'll just quickly duplicate it again, perhaps just something like a darker purple. We'll just make that even thicker, make it crazy thick. But I hope you can start to see how that's kind of starting to kind of get a glow effect. So literally in that case, all we are doing is duplicating the layer. They tend to be thicker the further you go down and more blurred and probably a lower opacity, just so that that white top line really sticks out. That's the thing that really gives things the glow. It's a very similar principle with a point. So you would have a very, I don't know, something like a point radius of 1, maybe even 0.5 on the top layer, and then, yeah, bigger circles going down the layer hierarchy and probably getting more blurred and more, and then dropping the opacity each time. But that's how I play around with that. And I mean, you can literally do as many as you want. I mean, I don't know how many I've done in the past to do that. But the interesting thing about it is that layer hierarchy and getting some of that glow effect. And this is where the layer hierarchy, you can see on the left here, the top left, sorry. You know, it's easy to change these things. You can literally just drag and drop the thing down. So now that white, very thin line has disappeared and it's gone further down the hierarchy. But, you know, it's just that simple. You can drag and drop and move things. Again, if you make a mistake with it, it's already there. It's always in the history. You'll see it at the bottom now. It says reorder the archive. I can just do that and it'll change it back to what it was before. So the beauty about lines to me, the beauty about Mapbox is this that flexibility with regards to line width. Sometimes I use incredibly thin lines just for really, really subtle purposes. Also, in terms of the blur, the blur to me is just the godsend. I'm just enables me to create all sorts of different kind of effects and create real subtlety. I like lines, one of my favorite things. The other things in here, other things that you might never use, but there's things like line joins and smoothing the line join, or the cap, the end of the line. You might not want it to be square, you might want it to be round. Have a play and then explore and see what these things do. I'll be perfectly honest, I don't know what everything does. I just experiment sometimes and find things that I like, cool things. But things like if you wanted the lines as a dash, you can add the dash with the gap. So you're not going to be able to see that now because I've obscured it with other glowy things. I'll maybe make it thicker as well. Let me make that thicker just to show. But you know, sorry, oh, that's terrible. 3. In terms of making a dashed line, yeah, okay, it's fine. You've got your dash, you've got your gap. You can adapt this as much as you wish and just play around with it. I don't even know what this does. I'm just sort of like half playing with it. Well, there you go. It's probably pretty intuitive. But anyway, the ability is there. The lines, have a go, style them in different ways, experiment. I do love lines. I love glowing things. Anyway, let's start with something else. There's a very similar principle with regards to circles or points. I think I've got one, which is, let's hope this is in here. Yes, so this is the one that I downloaded from Natural Earth. It's just populated places. It should show a load of dots. Again, the thing with this this kind of preview panel here, or the panel here, is it becomes really useful when you want to find what kind of attributes, etc., are within the data that you've uploaded. So using the map as a way to understand and understand your data is actually really kind of intuitive as well. But just seeing what's in here, you know, I don't know, I've just downloaded it. It's a shape file, uploaded it to here. There's a city name. There's all sorts of bits and bobs. There's probably something in there about population. I don't know. Oh, there's all sorts of different population things, projected populations, you know, and being able to see what's in that data will therefore enable you to do what Vanessa had suggested about, you know, some of the data-driven styling, be it filtering. You may only want to filter on a certain population, etc., that kind of thing. And just so using this as the interface to find out what's in your data is kind of pretty intuitive, and I think it's something that you probably use a lot more actually in terms of styling, filtering, etc. So again, you know, creating that kind of glow effect here they are. I'm just going to create them at 1, again having that white dot at the very top. Might make them bigger actually in this particular case. And again, it's just a case of duplicating, widening, making them a glowy color of some description, perhaps blurring them again. I do love blurring them. Oh, but this time I've actually done it the wrong way around, so I can just drop that in the hierarchy. Again, duplicate, make it bigger. That it's the same, exactly the same principle as the lines. There's just a few things that you can do just to make these things glow, but I think the secret in there is that top white point and it being really bright but small, having bigger circles underneath but dropping the opacity or blurring them. So yeah, I mean, that's just something very quickly with regards to the points and the lines, with regards to that kind of firefly blur effect. Keeping your map base lowly, the saturation black and white or just off black and white. But the other thing in here, you know, depending on your data, you might want to style things across a data range. So again, this is where all those attributes come in that sit under the data. I'm just going to search again. There's something there on population. I don't know, max pop 20, don't know what that means, but it's probably something in 2020 or 2010, doesn't really matter. But I'm going to style that, the size of that circle on that. So what's happening here is we now have, what have we got? We've got a range of 0 to something or other million. We're just going to just create the size of them. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, sorry, this is on color. I'm doing it on color. Sorry, never mind. You can just do it on anything. We'll ignore that actually. Oh, look, I don't like that. I meant to do it on size. I'll use undo. Yeah, I'll definitely use undo. But sorry, in terms of the radius, yeah, start across a data range, but the ability again just to be able to quickly get something in there and create the size, and we'll just go, I don't know, whatever, 20 based on population. We'll make it bigger. You know, there you go. You kind of got this horrific looking big blobby map, but it's there and you've got it. And then, you know, you can drop the opacity down so that you'll be able to see sort of some of the things underneath. You can blur them again. What about a stroke color? We might want them as something odd. So you might actually want a stroke on them. You might do, you might not do, but the ability is there. You might actually not want any kind of fill. You might just actually want the outside of the stroke. So you can reduce the opacity, and therefore you've got this kind of, like proportional outline circle, just from styling circles in a certain way, just from one data set. So the ability to kind of do that stuff really quickly and easily, it does look horrific. You'll have to forgive me. It's me experimenting. Look at that. Anyway, it's like measles. But the beauty of it is it's just in one layer, using the point and being able to just style it so differently with either a size across a data condition, by color if you so wish to do. You can style across the data condition on the color, and just that ability just to really, really experiment with the styling very, very quickly and simply. It's just good fun playing with it. I just spend too much time playing with things. Really shouldn't. Anyway, we'll get rid of the radius. So I'm gonna get rid of some of these conditions. You can clear the value here. And so we'll just keep another, what am I doing here? What should we have? Just have it something nicer sized. And so in this particular case, I just want the place name, sorry, the place label. I don't want a stroke at all. So you can just get rid of that. I think the opacity is low, so it's going to be a bit grey. So again, what we're doing here is we've got the circle. And again, so styling it. This is the other interesting aspect of this here. So the select data up here, within that data, if you want to label something, well, here's the other ways of playing with it. Just have a play sometimes with the data. So if you have particularly like a fill, you might have some polygons, a shapefile of polygons. You can actually turn those fills to the lines. So you could separately style the borders of the polygon file you've brought in. It would be styled as a fill, and then you might be able to do things like masks or have a separate kind of style on the border of the fill. But in this particular case, I just want to go to the symbol type. It's going to ask me to change it. That's fine. And this time I just want to bring in a data field. In this particular case for text, there's probably one called name. It's probably admin name. Might not be. No, it's not that one. This is where I know. This is where exactly where I can go into and use the thing. See, I didn't know what it was. So admin one name has probably got the name of something in it, has it? Yeah, something like that. Is there a name actually? There should be a name. Oh no. Oh, look at all the different things. Maybe name English. Anyway, sorry. I get carried away. I just want to insert the data field. I'm going to find whatever it was, name, something, English. Oh, name, that'll do it. But now what we're actually bringing through is the label. Again, Vanessa had kind of run through this, but this is sort of if you've got a file that you've uploaded, be it the GeoJSON, the shapefile, the CSV, etc. You've got your city latitude, longitudinal points in there, and you've got your name. You can use that same file to style in different ways. So you could just create different kinds of points, different kinds of styles for the points, or you can label them in this way as well. Again, if you duplicate it, and this time I want the select data again. So I'm going to the style and I just want it to be a circle. And this time a white circle. I should now have technically both the point and the place label. And that's just from the same, like I say, the same file. You can start to really play around with these things and filter them out and do certain other things. But one of the other things that I love doing on this is we'll get rid of the text for the moment. But this is using, this time I'm going to be using the translate function again, right? So I'm going to duplicate this. A lot of people ask me about how I do this, but I'm going to create another circle. I'm going to put it underneath it on the hierarchy, and this time I'm going to just make it really, really, really dark. And I'm going to blur it by whatever. And what I'm going to do this time is translate it, I don't know, maybe 5 by 5. So what it actually should start to do is offset that particular circle. I've probably blurred it too much, just so that you can't see where it is. Perhaps I should make it bigger. Let's make it bigger. Ooh, must have blurred that heavily. Ah, okay. You can kind of start to see it now. But yeah, that might work better actually with the satellite base with a little bit less saturation or something along those lines. But a lot of people ask me about how to sort of create shadows and things like that. So what I end up doing often is with, again, it's just duplicating the same layer. You're reusing layers in different ways, be it using it as a fill or using the line element of it or the point element of it, but then duplicating it and using it in a different way. But often a lot of people ask me how I kind of do sort of certain kind of shadow effects. That's really bad, but I'll just kind of drop those a bit and drop them a lot. But it's about doing kind of that kind of thing, but using the translate element of it. So you can probably see what happened there if I just sort of kind of moved some of the lines. So I'm pushing the shadow to be in a certain direction. So it's just playing with exactly the same layer, but using it from a different kind of point of view, using that translate function again. So points and lines, really good fun duplicating things, using the hierarchy, grouping things, playing around with the different styles. So again, something that's sort of in there. I'm just wondering if I've got an example of I think I've probably got a state thing. Let me find one. Let me find, this is again, so this is the similar principle. So this is just a shape file of simple state boundaries. At the moment, I've just set them there as black, but again, you know, I can duplicate that. I don't want it to be, I want to style the boundary different to the fill color. So I'm going to select the data again, and I'm going to change it this time to a line. Now, hopefully you can see that it's now a line. So now I can go, well, I don't want that to be black. I want them to be white. So they can now sit on top. And so using exactly the same layer, but just enabling different styling functions via the select data bit. What kind of thing do I want it to be? In there as well, I mean, what else is there in there? Yeah, the symbols, Vanessa sort of said symbols for, and then for labeling, that's really useful. There's the heat map function as well, if you've got a lot of points where you can try and get that heat map effect. Fill extrusions, where you do the kind of 3D stuff. If you've got polygons with a value in, it will probably do that. I don't know whether this data has actually got any in. We can try. Can't remember. In fact, we could find out by doing this. Let me see if this is going to work. I hope this works. It might not, but should have thought about this one. I get too excited just talking about. All right, states. Let me just try and see if I can shift this to a fill extrusion. Is there any data in there? Not much, is there? There isn't much in there. I don't know. Maybe we'll use the FIPS code or something just to show off what's possible. Say you had states with population data in. You can pick their fill extrusion style type, and you might want to style the height with a data condition. This is probably never going to work just because, oh, they're all strings anyway. That'll do it, won't it? Let's try this anyway. Oh no, that's not going to work. I'll tell you what, I'll show you with a different example. I know I've got something somewhere. Oh no, sorry, I digress. Let me stay on this. So, yeah, sorry. Using the polygon, using the same file, styling the polygon, the fill, and then using it as a line is really, really, really useful. Just gives you that different ability to style things cartographically in the way that you want them to. A lot of the times, a lot of people ask me about how to do kind of a mask. So I may as well show you that. I think we can probably do that in here. Sometimes you might want to style with a data condition. And you might want to style all the states black, but you might want to just highlight one particular state and have that transparent. So depending on your data, let's take Arizona. I'm styling with a data condition and I want Arizona to be transparent. So hopefully what you can see now is that Arizona went from black through to transparent. Now, what you might need to do actually is get the other countries. It's probably the worst example. I should have picked one of the central states. It doesn't matter. We can just add any. Yeah, well, that'll be fine. But anyway, so the point there really, sorry, again, is this ability to be able to style across data that's within the file itself. You'll be able to mask things in different ways. So this time, maybe we just want to have everything white except for that particular state with the fill. Perhaps we can just sort of do, a bit more. Let's have black lines for these ones this time. It might be that your only state of interest is one particular state. So you might just want to show off that. Again, you know, the beauty of this is that you can style it in any way. So if you want a particular kind of mask, you can shift the opacity. I use often kind of like a dark, so it just hides the most of the country, but you can just start to see through some of the detail underneath. Yeah, just have a play around, but yeah, just the different ways to kind of style things from one layer. Yeah, but that, I mean, playing with that, you know, using the different select data up here, I just really, really, really play with things. I'll kind of show you, even just, which is completely silly, but a heat map of those state lines and what it looks like. And, you know, okay, it's crazy. It's never going to work. It's just silly, but I actually use it for quite a lot for different things about getting certain kind of blur features and things like that, you know, and then I can go in here and change the intensity and the opacity, but obviously it has a proper statistical analytical function as well. But the ability is there if you want to use it. I use it quite a lot for odd styling types. Probably shouldn't do, but I do. It's just naturally mischievous and playing with things. Yeah. Okay, yeah, sorry. There was the other one about the sort of kind of the extrusions and making these other sort of kind of like 3D cool things. We'll just get rid of some of these because they're all a bit, they'll try and find a file. I'm hoping that I've got something I can think of. Right, let's see if this works. Let's see if it works. Extrusions. Did I have some data in my Bigfoot location thing? Perhaps not. Just pick anything. I'm just going to see if this kind of works. The wrong type of file. Let me find another one. Apologies. I do want to show you this. What have I used recently? Oh, there's nothing in that one either. Right, ignore me for that one. Anyway, maybe cover that another time. In fact, I think I've done a blog on it somewhere. Anyway, so yes. So I guess the kind of point of this was really just to really kind of show the ways you can really play around with it in terms of the styling and the ability to be able to do things with it. It kind of can get a bit crazy. I'm just thinking if I've got an example on here. I know I do for the extrusions, actually. So this is some of the extrusion data. Forgive me, it will load in a moment. It's a bit heavy, this one. So this is actually gridded population. So when you're using some of the extruded layer, it actually needs to be a fill or a polygon. So you might need to, if you've got a polygon or a fill, that's what it needs to be with some sort of numeric value in it to actually extrude the data based on a value. So this is some gridded population data in the US. I think I've pretty much got it for most of the US, but the idea here is just, to use these little spikes just to really show, population centers, density. I think it's per gridded, I don't know, kilometer or square mile. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's a really cool way of sort of showing certain things, particularly sort of perhaps in some of the more rural areas. The other thing that I've done on here is you might be able to see is use that feature again to kind of draw the shadows. So they should kind of move around. So using extrusions again is a really cool little feature. So in this particular case, it's using an extrusion on the height. So it's across the data range of the population. So styled across a data range. You can pick your color and etc. You can do some really crazy things with the base height. So you can set the base height as well as the actual height of the value of the extrusion. So then you can really start to create, I think I've done something like 3D trees where you just know the canopy is a certain height and things. Anyway, that's just good fun to do as well. If you can find some data that, again, something like state data with population in as a shape file would be perfect. And if you play around with the extrusions and you really push them up, and you get that kind of cool 3D effect as well. So that's really good fun to do as well. I think that's me at about time. I'm not entirely sure how long a whole session is meant to go on for, but I hope you found it useful. You know, Vanessa's on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Johnny_Walker, or if you need me, I'm johnny.walker@mapbox.com. Yeah, you'll find me on Twitter. It's probably the easiest way. Any questions, anytime, please do get in touch. Any way that we can help you out with anything, particularly with regards to styling, or if something, you know, is it possible to do this, or this? Please do get in touch and just say hi as well. Yeah, and show us what you do as well. You can share it on Twitter, please. That'd be really, really cool if you could. I'm not, like I say, sorry, apologies. I'm not entirely sure how long the session is meant to go on for, but if you've got any other further questions, track us down. As I said before, I'm on Twitter. Please do. Any questions, get back to us. And thank you very, very much for your time and tuning in. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, so we have about 20 minutes left. If you have any questions that we might be able to answer in the next 20 minutes, maybe you can write them in the chat. I have been trying to follow along and answer as much as I could as Johnny and I went through, but if you have any more questions, feel free to write them now and I'll see if I can point you in the right direction. I have been trying to share some resources along the way. BJ, there is, so this is an old blog post about Mapbox GLJS relative to extrusions, and there definitely have been some updates since this blog post was written in our code, but I think that could be a good place to start in terms of seeing how you can use code to do stuff relative to 3D and extrusions. It's definitely possible to automate that kind of thing. That would be a question for gray area if Matt is on the line, but I believe that you should have the link shared based off of what I read in email threads. I guess don't quote me because I'm not positive, but I understood it as you guys will have the link shared. Sorry, I have not drank water the past 3 hours. So if there aren't any other questions, I guess we can just, What software do you recommend for mapping when you need a vector file output? I've used QGIS, but it's not super user-friendly. Well, I would have recommended QGIS since for everyone that doesn't know about mapping softwares, the huge monolith company that exists is Esri, ESRI. That is a spatial software company that provides a lot of analytical capabilities in addition to exporting in a lot of spatial formats. The problem is it is a pretty big price point for trying to use that software. And the open source parallel is QGIS, which Duncan mentioned. Unfortunately, that typically is the best way to be able to do that. There are ways of doing vector file outputs from GeoJSONs, which is a sort of code extension, like a JavaScript friendly extension of shape spatial files. but then you have to know a little more about programming and coding, and perhaps, Duncan, you have used GeoJSONs before. There also just are a lot of different spatial file formats, but if you know or want to explore GeoJSONs, that is something that, depending on what your use case is, if you just need to trace some polygons online or add points, this may be useful to you if it isn't too complicated. Otherwise, unfortunately, QGIS is usually the best way to do various more complicated spatial file exports, including vectors, like if you're using a ton of spatial data and needing to export something very specific. Can you import GIS shapefiles, or do they need to be converted? Yes, you can directly import shapefiles to Mapbox Studio. It is one of the main file formats that is allowed for upload. And yeah, it doesn't need to be converted to CVS or JSON. Yeah, D3 is pretty great. There's this thing called MapShaper as well. If you have some spatial, if you have shapefiles, GeoJSONs, TopoJSONs, DBFs, or CSVs that you just need to manipulate in a particular way, generalize the file. Mapshaper.org is a really great place to also do some quick conversions. This has evolved a lot over the past decade. It used to just be about generalizing the lines and the points, but Mike Bostock, I believe, and other folks have constantly updated it, and it actually does a lot more now. You also can do things in code in addition to just the user interface that they provide. So if you do a lot of work with spatial data and SVGs and GeoJSONs, it's worth checking MapShaper out as well as part of your toolkit. Does anyone else have questions? Are there any particular resources that I would recommend? Yes, I have so many. So Mapbox, first of all, has some educational pieces about Mapbox, about learning how to make maps, about cartography. Twitter, some good hashtags to follow to ask questions are these two. Both of them are pretty active. The GIS chat is super active. People meet weekly. It's a really great community, and all kinds of different spatial folks will answer questions. I don't know how, I've had Twitter for a while, and I followed GIS chat for just a couple years, and I've always had people answer my questions, from deeper spatial analyses to cartographic questions. So I highly recommend using that if you have Twitter. I recommend Gretchen Peterson for some publications. She writes about open source GIS and cartography stuff. And honestly, gosh, Shaded Relief, which I mentioned before, is a good website. Let's see, I'm gonna quickly Google these to make sure I'm writing the URL correctly. For everything that relates to really specific aesthetics and designs, as well as the data behind it and making sure that you're setting up the data correctly or creating the elevation schemes correctly for Shaded Relief, like elevation models and topography maps, I highly recommend Shaded Relief. For honestly, something about maps, so many great tips about cartography that probably will usually be within Adobe Illustrator in terms of what softwares he's using, or this software called Blender, which is just a great free way of creating terrain maps. Something About Maps, which is Daniel Huffman. He is an amazing resource. I have to also say that there's this conference every year if you care about cartography, specifically, this conference is actually coming up and it's virtual this year, and membership is just $50, and that's all you need to watch all the live feeds. I've gone to this conference for almost 10 years. I constantly learn about everything in the field here. People will talk about really practical use cases across varying softwares. I find it so useful. Like, it's from, like, people go from handmade production also to softwares that I've mentioned, including Mapbox, also to code. There are also like academic discussions. So if you really are into research and just needing to know what's going on in that sense, I highly recommend that. The conference also has like the different companies that really are like constantly producing new things relative to mapping, present their latest and greatest, as well as tips and tricks and how to use stuff. And it just is a great place to also just meet people to answer your questions, because most of those people are on Twitter. The spatial community, for whatever reason, is really into Twitter and really likes sharing on Twitter. I think it's because people across the spatial world really care about sharing that information, because maybe it's like this like sort of niche, small knowledge thing that isn't as necessarily as accessible for folks to easily find the latest tutorials or blogs. There are quite a few people that do enjoy blogging, but compared to like other fields, like I'm sure there's way more blogs about doctors or lawyers than there are about maps, probably. So if you don't have Twitter, I do recommend it, but you don't have to have Twitter. NACIS is a good place to follow along. You don't have to attend in person. They do live streams. There are other spatial conferences, but that's the one that I really love. Integrate data sets from Google Earth Engine with Mapbox. That I don't know. It could be a yes. I would recommend contacting Mapbox support to answer that question. There are technical folks that would be able to answer that better than me. I'll send along a link for that. Mapbox does so many things. I don't know all the answers.
I think you know quite a lot of them, Vanessa.
I also, let's see, I don't know, feel free to like email me if you want more recommendations beyond just what I said, because I am a huge nerd and do have a lot of recommendations. It just also depends on what you want to learn as well. There's just like so many things that you can read and see. If there are no other questions, I'm happy to wrap everything up and hope that everyone has a great weekend. But do write any last minute questions if you have any. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Vanessa. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.